Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I wanted to go over sometimes where avoidants are falling out of love, where they don't actually say directly, I don't love you anymore, but they actually behave differently. Often it's because they don't know. And this is kind of an unpleasant topic. And I've had some unpleasant, like, I've had some consulting calls with you guys where this is occurring. It's not too often, but it does happen. And it's a little bit of an uptick in behaviors like this where folks are in long-term relationships. Normally, this isn't the case. Excuse me, where it is that they love you, they just don't know how to say it. But there is still a possibility where there's situations where they don't love you. And I don't like sugarcoating, I don't want to lie to you. And so this will help for you to distinguish that because avoidants are detached emotionally. A lot of times if you're married to them or in a long-term relationship with them, it can feel like they don't love you anymore when in actuality they do. They're just comfortable with you. But there is a situation where they don't love you and they might not say it. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt. And this is just speculative based on things that I've seen. It doesn't mean that it's going to fit every case. So please remember that. If you want to book a call with me, that's pinned in the comments. This doesn't happen to every avoidant, and it's a little more common with fearful avoidants that are male. But again, it's not always the case. But I'd like to share this with you so that if this is the case, you can get ahead of it or at least figure out what's really going on and have a conversation, okay? The first one is less defensive during arguments. It's interesting because avoidants, they typically are pretty defensive or they shut down. I'm not saying either of those things because when an avoidant shuts down or is defensive, it does show that they have care because that's why emotionally they still behave a certain way. They still are engaging emotionally. Even if it's disengaged, they still have a reaction is a better way to put it. Whereas if they're less defensive or not defensive at all, or less engaged or no engagement at all, including disengagement, they are normally because they don't feel like they need to defend their case or they don't feel very attached to the outcome of this argument. And typically that means because they don't care about the situation anymore. It might not be that they don't love you, but it could be that they're giving up, okay? So that's the first one. The next one is that they're less protective over you. So this one, it depends. But it's a little more common with male avoidants, where male avoidants, they tend to be protective over their partner, men in general. And so this one might not fit if it's a female avoidant, but regardless, both female and male avoidants are protective over their partner in a little bit different ways, I notice. But if you're noticing this individual is no longer protective over you where they used to be, this one could be a sign that maybe they're falling out of love or there needs to be a conversation. Because often, if it's that they are never protective over you, this is not going to fit. That's why it's a little tricky to say this one because it's usually when you see the change in their behavior where they used to be protective and they are no longer protective. This one is a pretty big one. The next one is actually all of these have like a lot of little subpoints and caveats, but this one has a pretty big one. If they encourage independence constantly. So independence for you, not for them. However, if you are someone who is overly anxiously attached or you're fearful, leaning heavily anxious, and you tend to be a little bit attached to the outcome of the relationship, or maybe your emotions are a little dysregulated, which happens, right? Trauma. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But sometimes the reason is they're encouraging you to be independent because they feel like it will help you. So that's not really what I'm talking about. You will have to be able to distinguish the difference, or you can have a call with me and we can talk about it. But for a general standpoint, the way really to distinguish it is if you feel like when they're trying to tell you to be independent, it's like they're tiptoeing around saying you're too much. If that's the case, yes, that's hurtful, but it still means that they're attached to the relationship because they want you to be better so that you guys can have a more healthy relationship. Does that make sense? However, if they're encouraging independence regardless of your outcome or you getting better about something, this means that they're just trying to encourage independence so that they can have some space away from you and so that maybe you can have a setup about potentially when they do break up with you or when they do leave, that it's not going to be extremely devastating for you because you have something else to fall onto, which is that independent portion. The next point is actually regarding mistakes in general. So I'll break it up in two ways. If they made a mistake, They are indifferent to your reaction about their mistake. Okay, so that's one point. The other point is, if you make a mistake, they don't have a reaction or an expectation about it either. Okay, and so those are the two perspectives regarding mistakes. So let's break it up so we can talk about it in a little bit more detail. Typically, if they make a mistake and you have a strong reaction towards it, okay, and so you will have a strong reaction towards it, especially if this is a relationship that you expect change, which is good, it's healthy. They don't try to deny it. They don't even try to repair it or even blame you, okay? And this is because they're emotionally checked out. I want to stop on this because it's a little bit challenging from one perspective. And that perspective is that avoidance, when they are attached to you, I'm not saying this is good, so please keep that in mind. I'm not saying this is good. They might deny or even blame you for the thing that they feel bad about that happened, okay? They did something wrong, they're going to blame you for it. It's not good, it's not healthy. But why do they do that? Because you feeling bad bothers them. And so they're trying to say, well, it's not my fault. Don't put it on me. Don't be mad at me. Don't think it's something I did wrong. Don't think I failed this relationship. I'm not a bad girlfriend. I'm not a bad boyfriend. In fact, it could have been you. It could have been someone else. They're deflecting. It's not good. But the reason they're doing this is because emotionally, they care. It's not good, but they care, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't waste their energy on trying to defend or deny or blame someone else about something, because they're reacting because they don't want you to reprimand or leave them for it. The fact that if they were to add indifference to that, you could say, well, I'm going to leave. And they could say, okay, they're all right with that if they're starting not to love you anymore. Okay. And so a sub point of this that we were talking about earlier, which is also important to explore, is if you make a mistake, they're also indifferent to your mistake. In fact, you might not even realize this is happening. This one is a little harder to distinguish on a video, like to talk about. But if you make a mistake, maybe it's something they used to react about. That might be a better way to put it. They are no longer reacting towards that because it doesn't really matter anymore to them, because they don't have that same attachment towards the relationship any longer. They're not worried about the outcome of the relationship, and they're not worried about you resolving whatever this mistake is, because it no longer holds the same weight, because likely they don't love you anymore, or they're planning to leave, or both, right? And this is very different from if an avoidant discards you, right? A lot of times when an avoidant leaves you for their trigger at random, this is not because they don't love you. It's because they were triggered. That's why a lot of times they come back when that happens. This video that's not what we're talking about today. It's when they actually are starting not to love you anymore. There are still ways to resolve this, but there's no point in saying this never happens. That's just not true. Does it happen less often? Sure, but it does happen. And so that's kind of what I mean by that. They're kind of emotionally checked out regardless of if you make a mistake or if they make a mistake. And the last one is tricky because it's very hurtful, and I want to make sure that we touch on this in a detailed way, but I also want it to be where, just take it with a grain of salt while we still try and detail it. They encourage you to date someone else. Okay. So there are a couple pieces to this. If they feel like they failed you, they might encourage you to date someone else because they're like hurting. If they're fearful of avoiding, especially, sometimes it's like a pity party type of thing where they're like, you could be better with somebody else. I'm not good enough for you. You're better than me. That's not what I'm talking about. They still care about you, but they're like in their own defensive wounds. Okay. I'm talking about where they actually are. You've been together for a while, you've had a relationship, and they're actively, slowly encouraging you to be with someone else. Not in the beginning stages of the relationship, because that's a deactivation strategy. I'm talking about later in the relationship. I hope that makes sense. It's a stage of it, not necessarily what they're saying. It is how they say it as well. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up because I do want you guys to be mindful of this. I don't want you to take it to heart because a lot of you guys take these things a little too much to heart, and I don't want you guys to get hurt. I'm just saying a general consensus. If an avoidant does these things, it could mean they're falling out of love. It means that they might be less defensive in arguments. They'll be less protective over you, especially if they were protective at one point. They will encourage independence constantly. If you make a mistake or they make a mistake, they're pretty indifferent to it, and they're indifferent to your reactions as well. And the last one is they actually encourage you to date someone else. I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.